Hello everyone, this is Nicholas Morgan, USD 475, Sites Elementary, and here's my presentation over the chapter summaries for the Teacher's Guide to School Law. And starting with chapter 1, after I read this chapter, I wasn't real familiar with the idea that school districts are public corporations. I did not know that schools are a federal interest, state function, and local responsibility. I mean, I kind of understood that, but I don't feel like I was fully aware of that concept. As an educational leader, I believe this is important that leaders contribute to policies and provide political support for excellence and equity in education, which is one of the indicators of ISLIC Standard 6. In Chapter 2, Instruction and Curriculum Standards, after I read this chapter, I was unfamiliar with the idea that over the last 3 decades, lawsuits on the grounds of educational malpractice have emerged as a formidable threat to educators. I also kind of realized that maybe it increased a little bit, but I didn't realize it was emerging and it was really that bad, because at the school I've worked at for the past 3 years, we've never, luckily, knock on wood, had any real run-ins with lawsuits with any of our staff members. And as an educational leader, I feel that leaders must develop a strong professional culture that supports teaching, learning, and a shared commitment to the vision and goals, which is like standard number 2. Chapter 3, Religion and Public Schools. After reading this chapter, I didn't realize the initial intent of the First Amendment was to prohibit Congress from making laws supporting religion, and this prohibition also applied to the states as well. And as an educational leader, it is imperative to model personal and professional ethics, integrity, justice, and fairness, and expect the same from others, anybody that's in the school setting. And this is related to ISLIC Standard 5. Chapter 4, Students, the Law, and Public Schools. After reading this chapter, I never fully understood that the First Amendment guaranteed the right to a freedom of speech to U.S. citizens, including students in public schools. And as an educational leader, I feel like it is expected of you to demonstrate a respect for the inherent dignity and worth of each individual student. And if you respect their freedom of speech, I feel like you uphold this characteristic that many strong educational leaders possess. Chapter 5, Due Process and Student Safety. And after reading this chapter, I was unfamiliar with the idea that school leaders are pressured by parents, citizens, and school boards to provide a safe teaching and learning environment. I understand that school leaders strive to do these 3 things, but I wasn't fully aware of how much pressure is put on them by the groups of stakeholders to actually carry this through. And once again, that might just be a result of the school I work at being having a culture of safety and familiarity in their learning environment. As an educational leader, I believe it is important to ensure a safe environment by addressing real and potential challenges to the physical and emotional safety and security of students and staff, and that is directly correlating to ISLIC Standard 3. Chapter 6, Liability and Student Records. And after reading this chapter, I didn't know that when the consent is necessary to release student records, that it must be provided in written form and signed and dated by the consenting person. I just thought if they gave a verbal consent or something like that, that was fine, that you could release information on students, maybe not necessarily their records. But as an educational leader, I think it's mandatory to protect the rights and appropriate confidentiality of students and staff members, which is ISLIC Standard 5. Chapter 7, Individuals with Disabilities. After reading this chapter, I was unfamiliar with the idea that the two practices that tend to create additional challenges for children with disabilities are exclusion and misclassification based on improper assessments. Once again, I am very proud of the school that I taught at the last 3 years. We have an excellent track record, and I don't think that we really violated in either of these two practices, at least that I was aware of, within my 3 years of working at that school. And as an educational leader, I think you must identify and use high quality research and database strategies and assessments that are appropriate in the local context to increase learning for every student, which is related to ISLIC Standard 2, Teaching and Learning. Chapter 8, The Teacher and Liability. And after reading this chapter, I didn't know that foreseeability is the crucial element in the liability, in a lot of the liability cases involving parents, and this is especially when those cases involve negligence. And as an educational leader, I think it's important to ensure a safe environment by addressing real and potential challenges to the physical and emotional safety and security of students and staff. Like mentioned earlier in one of the chapters, this is ISLIC Standard 3. So teachers must kind of be able to, hopefully, like I know I've read some of the cases that have gone on in the media about teachers that have done things where they did not use foreseeability very well. Chapter 9, Discrimination in Employment. After reading this chapter, I was unfamiliar with the idea that by law, a plaintiff, teacher, or administrator must demonstrate that he or she has made application for a position, is qualified, and was not given fair consideration for the position. And as an educational leader, it's important to implement practices to recruit and retain highly qualified personnel regardless of what their race is, their religion, their disability, etc. This is ISLIC Standard 3, relates to that. So it doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, where you have been. It just matters that the principal hires who they think is the most highly qualified applicant. Chapter 10, Teacher Freedoms. After reading this chapter, I didn't realize that teachers may not refuse to teach certain aspects of the state-approved curriculum on the basis of religious objections or beliefs. And as an educational leader, it's important to guide staff members towards the idea of building on diverse social and cultural assets, which is ISLIC Standard 6. And I just thought that I wasn't fully aware that teachers, if they didn't want to teach something, that I just thought they didn't necessarily have to. I knew it was frowned upon, but I didn't realize that they must teach certain aspects of the state-approved curriculum regardless of what their personal opinion is on that content. Finally, Chapter 11, Tenure, Dismissal, and Collective Negotiations. After reading this chapter, I was unaware that the courts usually support districts during times of financial exigency. And I don't think I pronounced that correctly, but I know this is something that's probably a lot of school districts have had to go through in the last few years with our budget cuts and the state of our economy, our national economy and state economy. And I wondered if there are any type of legal ramifications for just having to let someone go basically because they couldn't pay them. And as an educational leader, I think it's important to operate within budget and fiscal guidelines and directs them effectively towards teaching and learning, which is ISLIC Standard 3. But if you don't have the money to pay someone, then you're not doing your job as operating within those budget and fiscal guidelines. So thank you very much. Nicholas Morgan here, USD 475 at Sites Elementary, Assistant Principal. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thanks.